Let's talk dogs. Let's talk. I had a few things I wanted to ask you in my notes, but you mentioned a golden that came in today. I've brought up my golden that had a bunch of health problems, bad genetics. What are the breeds? Is it really common for you to see goldens? You know, what are the sporting breeds, the working dogs that you see come in most often with cancer, with the real health trouble?
Well, probably our worst breed for cancer is Vizslas.
Well, really?
They're tumor factories. I mean, they just make the heck out of cancer. They're probably either them or boxers would be the most. Now, you don't see a lot of Vizslas, but I mean, whenever they come in, I'm like, okay, where's the tumor at? Because they just make cancer like crazy. So they're probably our number one sporting dog as far as cancer goes. Number two is probably Goldens. I mean, they're really bad about hemangiosarcomas. We see tons of those. You know, every Golden that's over 6, man, I spend an extra amount of time palpating their abdomen because we're constantly taking out spleens out of those guys. And then, Goldens are really bad with skin issues. I mean, they have lots of hot spots, lots of sensitive skin stuff, lots of ear issues. We see a lot of elbow dysplasia in Golden Retrievers, a fair amount of hip dysplasia. Surprisingly, we don't see that many cruciates in Goldens, way more in labs. You know, they're by far and away overrepresented among any other dog. So,
what about GSPs for that?
Not very much at all, really. We'll see the occasional skin allergy issue in a bird dog. But by and large, they're pretty dang healthy, really. You know, we deal with little traumatic stuff and stuff like that, but most of them, we don't see the common over and over problems again that we do in labs for sure.
So let's back up a second on this, the cancer in the Goldens and the Vizslas. Why? Is it just pure poor breeding, poor genetics? Is that what's going on there?
Well, there's no doubt that, genetics play a part. Now, how all that has come and gone and all that, who knows? But it's just like with us, when we go to the doctor, they want to take a thorough family medical history just because it's super important. And, if it's happened to someone in your lineage, there's a decent chance that you may have the same issue. But, a lot of that stuff like cancer isn't necessarily A plus B equals AB divided by 2, but if it's happening more, then it's going to pop up more often. It's not necessarily going to be something you can predict, but that card's going to be getting thrown out there more,
That's so interesting. So on this podcast, we get into, what people will shop for a lab because of the color, or they want a red lab or a silver lab or something kind of trendy. And I get in trouble every time I talk about this because people love their dogs and they don't want me to say this, but I'm trying, we're trying to get a lot of guests on who can speak to quality genetics as far as performance, and what these dogs are capable of as far as athletes and intelligence. But health is such an integral part of that, a part of the quality bloodlines, and hearing you say that about these dogs just makes me think about like how important that part is.
Yeah. And a lot of our recommendations are kind of based on breed. Like, if anyone that owned a Golden Retriever came in and said, hey, what should I be feeding my dog? I'm going to say, well, your dog needs to be on a fish-based diet. And they're going to be like, well, why? Well, those omega-3s are anti-inflammatory towards the skin, and they help out across the board with hot spots no matter what, and really any skin allergy, atopy, dermatitis, whatever, ear infection type thing, a fish-based diet is going to help you to some degree, especially if, you have a breed that's predisposed to that. Mm-hmm. And, those fish-based diets help when it comes to joints and hips and all that stuff too. So, so sometimes without even knowing anything about that individual dog, we may just make a breed recommendation right off the bat,
Mm-hmm. Do you see, are people open to that idea of a specific diet for their dogs, or do they kind of just gloss over that and go, yeah, I'm just going to keep buying whatever I've been buying? Or are people responsive, do you think?
And I think, you kind of have a couple different groups of people, but I think the majority of the people that are responsible enough to bring their dog to the vet are going to hold our recommendations with a significant amount of merit, and they're going to at least let their ear be bent and let the seeds be planted, even if they don't do it that day. I think a lot of them will do it with a little bit of time. And then you have some people that are like, oh, this guy's just trying to get my money, which I could care less what you feed your dog from. I mean, we don't even sell any regular dog food diets. We just sell prescription diets. But no, I think most people still, they come to us and they want to know what we recommend that they put their dogs on, So if I make a specific recommendation to someone and take my time to do it, most of them are going to do that.
Do you so do you recommend a fish-based diet over some kind of fish oil or krill oil supplement then?
Yeah, I do now. I mean, back in the day, like let's say 10, 12 years ago, we sold pallets of 3V caps, which were an omega-3 supplement. But the diet started getting better and cleaner and having the proper ratio of omega-3s to 6s. And so now I haven't sold a bottle of omega-3 supplements for 10 years probably, because the diets are just so much better. They're clean, they're right, they have the right ratios and all that. So I think you're just way better off eating a good fish-based diet than you are giving an omega-3 supplement.
Huh. Is there any issue with like bioavailability there as far as the ingredients used in a dog food formula, a fish-based dog food formula versus just a supplement, a capsule or something, or does that not matter?
No, I'm sure it matters. But, if you're feeding your dog, let's say you're feeding your dog whatever, I don't know, pick anything, and then you're throwing an omega-3 supplement on there, I don't know exactly what all the interaction between what's in the diet and what's in the supplement would be. It's probably not that big a deal either way. I mean, hell, my dog eats, well, the other day she ate some, what was I feeding her? Oh, burn-ins and all that stuff from Rogers Sporting Goods, Definitely not on the recommended program, especially for the summertime when she's not doing much. But, it's not like, oh, my God, she's ruined for the rest of her life because she ate that. But I still think that, the diets, our leaders in the pet food industry are spending a lot of money and doing a lot of research to make sure that they're feeding the optimum food from a nutritional requirement and a bioavailability requirement and all kinds of stuff that I've recovered from and forgot decades ago,
Yep.
But these people, they're doing it every day. And so, to me, the things that are important are don't feed some niche, cool sounding whatever diet. Stick with someone that's an industry leader that's spending the money, doing their research, has, the people and the facilities and all that stuff to make sure they're producing a top of the line product. And I think we're way better off just sticking with a formulation that's made for those types of conditions, skin conditions, than, just throwing a supplement on top of whatever.
Yep. There seems to be somewhat of a sweet spot in dog food, like quality dog food, where you can pay, it's going to be like a middle ground, like a $40 to $45, $50 bag of dog food, for a big bag of dog food. So you can spend cheap, like you'd be buying McDonald's for yourself or Spam for yourself, and it's probably not going to be very quality. Or you can way upspend and get this trendy blueberries and no byproducts type of organic thing that they're marketing strictly to a certain kind of pet owner. But the middle ground seems to be where those well-researched, big company products come from that end up being kind of the sweet spot.
I agree 100%. I mean, in today's world, and of course, I've seen kind of both sides of it because, when I had MOmarsh, I was on the manufacturing vendor supply side, right? And then, I'm on the veterinary side and I'm also on the consumer side. But, if you think about, and I'm not going to name any company names here, but if you think about some of the pet food recalls, when there was, let's say, aflatoxin in some wheat or whatever it was, there are so many niche brands that are getting made by whoever, some feed mill somewhere, right? So there was the one case where there were like 40 brand recalls because it was all getting made by the same company. It was just different marketing firms sitting in an office somewhere with the graphic design dude that was coming up with some catchy copy and making a cool looking label. And we're feeding something that is getting pushed to us by, a brace wearing acne face teenager in PetSmart, because that's what they're telling me he's going to get an extra buck if he sells it. Nothing against PetSmart or acne face teenagers. I was there, man. But seriously, I mean, a lot of it is exactly marketing. And so like when people come in, I'm like, what are you feeding your dog? And I mean, like, are you feeding it a chicken-based diet, a fish-based diet? They're like, blue, neutral, whatever. And I'm like, they're like, what are you thinking? I'm like, I have no idea. Never heard of it. That name probably doesn't mean anything, And so I think to get back to what you were saying, I think sticking with a large established company that has the research capacity and the money to do that and stay on top of what's best and quality controls is the best way that a person can go.
Yeah. We go down this road a lot, and it's important thing to discuss, to think about, what you're putting inside your dog every day, and we tend to look at those decisions, the buying decisions based off of what we'd want to eat in our lives. You look at price and you look at, I like blueberries, I don't want to eat byproducts, but we're not dogs, man. We don't have that digestive system. We aren't them. So it's not what we want. Although, like you said, the marketing out there is often like, okay, well, the dogs aren't coming into the store to buy this. The people are. Let's sell to them. Yeah. And you need to find somebody who's making the right stuff for your dog. I wanted to ask you, so I talk to bird dog owners, working dog owners all the time. And you and I were having a little conversation on the phone the other day, and you brought up something, and I had it in my notes. I'm like, I got to ask Ira about this. So I told you I wanted to talk to you about sporting dog injuries. So we talked about, cancer and some stuff earlier, but the things you see happen to a dog in the field. And you said cruciatus, ACL, stuff like that. And you mentioned something about hardwood floors. So can you just give a little rundown of the common types of injuries you see come in? And then I want to get into your theory about the hardwood floor thing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so we see a lot of sporting dogs in the office, but we also have a bunch of guides that work for us at Habitat Flats, and they all have dogs. And so, these aren't upland bird dogs. These are retrievers. And right here, we're located in St. Charles County, Missouri. St. Charles County is where the confluence of the Missouri River and the Mississippi come together. And subsequently, there's just tons of duck clubs around here. And so all those duck clubs have, a lot of duck hunters and a lot of dogs. So we see a lot of their dogs' injuries and problems as well. And so probably the biggest things that we see, and we've done some of this stuff like on some of our old Habitat Flats DVDs back in the day, but early in the year in September, early October, that's when all the grasses are maturing and all the seeds are ready to just fall off, and you send your dog running through the millet and there's just seeds going everywhere. Well, different dogs have different degrees of eyelid tightness, so like some of them hardly ever get a seed. And then there's others that are a little bit ectropic, so that lid's kind of hanging down just a little bit. Man, those things are just like sacks, they can get absolutely full of seeds in there. So we see that all the time, in September, late August, September, maybe early October, we're constantly getting dogs in here with, pus just pouring out of their eyes, and they're red. And, almost always they've got weed seeds in there. So just to stick on that topic a little bit longer, like at Habitat Flats, when we're teal hunting, we know that's a problem. A lot of times we're going to try to find an open spot, try to keep our dogs from going, just bulldozing through that millet, try and help them out, from getting so many seeds in there. So guys might just think about that. If you've got an option of hunting here in September, you might want to pick, the more open spot so your dog doesn't get as many seeds. And then another thing that's super common, there's two things that will cause major foot problems. So WRP, when you mow it, those pigweed stems, they're really, really strong and rigid. Same thing with soybean stubble. Some dogs, every year we end up having to take them out for 2 weeks once or twice, because their foot's the size of a basketball. And then other dogs, I don't know if they just run differently or their foot's a little different or what. Some of them we just really don't have the problems, but super common to see dogs running stuff up through their feet, and then, they'll limp a little bit and then they're okay. And then like 2 days later, man, it just goes to heck, you end up with a huge abscess and a foot that's all swollen. And we try to do some things about it. I mean, you can go out there and like roll your bean stubble, even disc it up a little bit. But, most people aren't going to go through the expense and time of doing something like that. But, man, it's super common problem. And as far as injuries go, I mean, those are probably the biggest ones. We see a lot of other things that are traumatic injuries, like dogs jumping onto, beaver stobs and getting hung up on things and cutting their feet on who knows what beer bottles or pieces of tin or whatever, And, there's just not a whole lot you can do to predict that kind of stuff, but it certainly happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a wild environment out there that we ask them to go full blast in. And so, you talking about, running through the millet or getting stuff stuck in their eyes, plant awns or seeds or whatever. Not only, should people be cognizant in the early season of where they're hunting their dog, but where you're training your dogs too. A lot of people get real fired up to start working that dog hard, this time of year when doves open or early teal, and, that's an easy thing to prevent. It might be a little more difficult out where you might have limited spots to hunt or something, but pay attention to where you're training your dog. And that probably ties in a little bit to the foot care too.
That's a great point. Since you said that, from a training situation, we've got August Bush, which is a big public training. They hold tons of hunt tests there, and had the national field trials there a couple years ago. And anyway, yeah, man, we see all the time fish hooks, fishing line, beer bottles, just all, before you take your dog to a spot like that, you might think about, okay, do I want to train my dog here? Because, people have been partying here. There's probably broken glass. There's fishing line everywhere. There's hooks, all that stuff. So that's a great point.
Yeah. Pay attention to where, just as a little further example, I train my dog around my house here in the suburbs of the Twin Cities at a bunch of places. We've got little boat landings, boat access, public access on lakes, canoe access on some of the rivers around me, places where people party. Like, they are just places where people are floating the river, they're tubing or they're canoeing or something, and they're drinking beers, and they're just higher likelihood you're going to run into something that could tear your dog's foot up. And so I'm always kind of checking that stuff out before working the dog. You can't prevent everything, but a little bit of that stuff, paying attention and being cognizant of the environment you're working your dog in, can go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one other thing we didn't talk about was hypothermia. Of course, that's its own whole topic, but we don't tend to see that in the hospital because people have typically solved it before they could get here, but obviously it's something that should always be on people's minds. So
for sure. Let's hit on that. I want to back up a second. So you mentioned fish hooks in dogs. So my dog got a fish hook stuck right into her chest like a week ago. And the reason is because I was fishing with my 7-year-old, one of my 7-year-olds in the boat with my dog. And my one daughter, I talk about her a lot. She does not pay attention to rules. Like, I always joke that she's like the Joker. She just wants to watch the world burn. She does not give a shit what you say. She's going to do her own thing. And we were fishing smallmouth, and she had a lure that's called a whopper plopper. It's, chugs along the surface, smallie, smoke it, whatever. And I had told her, I'm like, honey, you got to be careful, and we fish together all the time. But she just went to say something to me, and she swung that right into my dog's chest. And usually Luna's kind of laying in the bottom of the boat, but Luna was sitting up next to me. And so it was my fault. And Lila had the presence of mind when she stuck that into Luna's chest, because sometimes it'll get caught in the hair, but sometimes it goes kunk right in there. And Luna yipped. And so I knew that it had stuck. And Lila had the presence of mind to open up her bail. So, because Luna started running around the boat and I said, heel, and she stopped, but she was scared.
Yeah.
And I got to pop it out, but it was a teachable moment for us because I'd been telling her that she had to be careful with that for a while. So there are lots of ways to get a fish hook stuck in your dog, and it popped right out. It was
better Luna than you.
I wish, dude, it could have went south. With the way, it's a little bass boat. There's only so far she can run. But if Lila had that tightened up and hadn't had the peace of mind or the presence of mind to open up that bail, then it could have got a lot worse. It didn't. It just barely stuck in there. I mean, I grabbed the pliers and popped it right out, and it wasn't even past the barb.
Right.
And Luna's a good dog. If I raise my voice, she's like, okay, sorry, but she panicked, and I panicked because I was like, oh, this is going to be a train wreck, and so it worked okay. When you talk about foot care, so I want to get to this, the hardwood floor theory, but also since we mentioned where you're training and where you're getting your dog exercise, surfaces, just in general, like what kind of surface are you working your dog on? Because you're talking about soybean stubble, you're talking about wetland reserve program, cut, grasses and native grasses, stuff like that. But just soccer field versus pavement versus gravel. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, certainly working them on pavement or gravel, either one. Now, our dogs tend to be in pretty decent shape, right? I mean, they tend to be fairly active, which it's like when I just went to Argentina. The first 2 days, I was like, oh, my shoulder. And then, after I'd shot a couple of days, I'd built up enough scar tissue or whatever there, I was good to go. Could have shot a bazooka and it wouldn't have been a problem. Same thing with dogs. If they've been sitting on the couch all summer long and you think, oh my God, I got to go get ready for dove season, and you run them on hot asphalt for 45 minutes, chances are they're going to run their pads right off, Mm-hmm. And so at the same time, if you got a puppy, I mean, working it on asphalt where it can have a long mark and help build confidence, no grass, none of that, there's something to be said for that too. But yeah, I mean, I think that depending on what you're trying to achieve, working them in cover where they can't see the bumper or where they can see the bumper, and then keeping in mind too, like, really gravel and asphalt can be the hardest on their feet probably.
Yep. So the thing that I want to get to with that is, some people, we're bird dog owners, so we're used to getting our dogs exercise while we work with them, whether it's tossing a bump or working marks, whatever you're doing. But some people are just taking them out and say, hey, follow me on the 4-wheeler and run for 3 miles a day. And I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying, like, man, if you're going to do that with your dog every day and you're doing it on gravel or you're doing it on a concrete asphalt trail, something like that, that's hard, that's pounding on their joints.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, again, if they're used to it, start in moderation, right? So start off with baby steps and then work them up into it, especially this time of year when some are old, like our younger dogs, they're in training all the time, but an 8-year-old that already knows, pretty well what they're going to do, and you haven't done anything since last hunting season with them, try to get them a little bit of physical activity before opening day of dove season rolls around. But at the same time, you don't need to take that 8-year-old dog and tie it up to your bicycle and go down the Katy Trail, 10 miles per day either. Just keep in great shape, At some point, it can backfire on you and come back the other way too much. Like now I'm 50, I'm not going to go out there and run 5 miles every day. Hell, I probably wouldn't be able to walk, in 2 years.
Well, yes, if you wanted to work up to that, I bet you could get there though, but you wouldn't want to, I always say this about hunting dogs. If your dog's been sitting on the couch, since last season ended, and you're going to take it out for opening day pheasants for the first time, it hasn't done anything other than maybe go for some walks or run around the yard. That would be like if you were like, hey man, I'm going to run marathons this year. And how I'm going to train for marathons is by running marathons.
Right.
And what you do is injure yourself 4 seconds into it and be like, well, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. But we expect our dogs to be able to do that because they are phenomenal athletes, but that's not how it works.
Well, and the other thing, and this is probably I don't want to get too far off, and maybe we'll just circle back around to this. You let me know, because I know you want to talk about cruciates and that kind of stuff. But I think probably the thing that we sporting dog owners struggle with the most for the regular guy is that we think it's hard for us to shift gears from non-hunting season, when we need to be focused on keeping our dogs from getting fat and keeping them in some degree of decent shape. And when it is hunting season and their nutritional requirements are really high and their caloric requirements are really high, you have to have two different mindsets there. It's not like, here's what we need to do, and that's what you do year round. We have to alter it unless we're doing some intense training, in the off season. And so I think that a lot of us don't do a very good job of that, myself included. Trying to keep our dogs at a pretty ideal weight, especially as they get older in the off season, keep them from getting too heavy. I mean, think about ourselves, how hard that is if we, just sat on the couch and ate potato chips 9 months out of the year, and then we're expected to go and do, some intense swimming across frozen rivers and retrieving doves when it's 110 degrees with a mouthful of feathers, So we need to all try to be mindful of, the nutritional aspect of the off season as much as the on season, and then also, trying to keep them in a decent body condition score year round. Hard to do, hard to keep them there, fat enough in the winter if you're really hunting a bunch, and hard to keep them skinny enough in the spring.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up about not only the exercise, but the nutrition, just to circle completely back. It's, you see this with people all the time. They go, oh, I'm going to do keto. I'm going to do paleo. I'm going to lose a bunch of weight. And diet certainly is an important part of it. But if you want to be in shape and lose that weight, you have to move your body and you have to eat right. And it's the same thing with dogs. Like you can get a dog to look like it's in good shape by not feeding it very much, but you're not getting that dog. You're only doing one part of it. That dog has to exercise. That dog has to move. And you have to be aware of that, like you said, throughout the year. What a dog needs for exercise in, August, and what it needs for food is different than what it needs in November. There's certain times of year where this stuff really matters. So the more in tune you are to that with your dog, and you see the dog's performance. If you hunt enough like we do, you see, what's that dog like on day 3? How is it recovering? How is it reacting? Does it have a lot of energy, or is it crapping out early, or what's going on? And there's so many clues to that if you're paying attention.